Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Tedesco, Director of Education here at the Buffalo Naval Park. Behind the camera is Shane Stevenson.
Hi everyone.
So today we're going to talk about Executive Order 9981. It is the 75th anniversary of when President Truman signed the executive order. The executive order itself desegregates the military. Before that, you were allowed to segregate units in the military. It was something that had been done since the beginning in the Revolutionary War, all the way up until 1948. But there were still some segregated units through the Korean War, but this at least put it on paper that you can't do that. Executive Order 9980 was also passed on this day, which forbids discrimination in employment, and specifically in the armed forces. So both of those were signed on this date 75 years ago to help integrate the armed forces to what we have today. So back in March of 2022, we did an exhibit called Two Wars, The Road to Integration. Some of you might have seen the documentary that we have. So this is actually the exhibit that the documentary was based on. This started as an exhibit that we were doing with Visit Buffalo Niagara, that they asked us to participate in this. We thought it was a great story of Americans coming together, a great story of celebrating our accomplishments as a nation. So you can see right now, what Shane is showing you is some of the belongings of Private Indiana Hunt Martin. She was part of the 6888 Postal Directory Battalion, which was a group of Women's Army Corps members that would go overseas to England and then France to sort the mail and get it back home to families of soldiers. There was about a 2-year backlog, so some of these families hadn't even heard from their loved ones in 2 years, which is a scary thought in the 40s when there's no email, there's no phones like we have today. So here we have Executive Order 8802. This was signed by FDR, June 25th, 1941. Now this one was signed about 7 years before 9981, and this one in the war manufacturing industry, now not the military itself, but the war manufacturing industry, had to be able to hire anyone regardless of race or color or creed. So this was a start that led into 9981, but this was about 7 years earlier.
So that's for private business.
Correct. This had a lot of repercussions actually. If you come over here, you can see the 1943 race riots. This was in Beaumont, Texas, but Mobile, Alabama, Detroit, Michigan, and Harlem, New York all had race riots.
These race riots were in retaliation for that executive order that Roosevelt signed. Essentially,
yeah. So basically, more people of color were getting jobs in the war manufacturing industry that led to less white people getting hired in those positions. Or sometimes it would just be a position that someone that a person of color would never normally have, such as a welder, right? So now they're moving up into welding positions, taking away positions from other people, and now they're working equally with white manufacturing people, and they just didn't like it. This is Public Law 11797, was signed in March of 2022, which allowed the 6888 the Congressional Gold Medal. Basically, it's the highest civilian award given. Even though they're military, this isn't a civilian award for their acts overseas during World War II with the 6888 Postal Directory Battalion. USS Mason, commissioned to the U.S. Navy, one of 2 U.S. Navy ships with largely African-American crews in the world. Of course, they did have white officers at the time.
That's a nice picture.
Yep, that's the USS Mason that we're looking at right here. So we did put in some other events that just kind of coincided with the war as a whole, but we also felt was important. So you had FDR, who was not necessarily an ally of the African-American community, but you did have Eleanor, who was a big ally, and not just an ally, actually got things done. So FDR does die on April 12, 1945, with Truman taking over. Now Truman is an unlikely ally because he comes from a family of Confederate sympathizers. They had a distaste for Abraham Lincoln and everything civil rights. So for him to become the person that integrates the armed forces, and not only integrates the armed forces, but the first sitting president to speak to an audience of NAACP members, just makes him an unlikely ally for that. And it makes it interesting. And you could see some of the letters and stuff that he wrote to Bess, his wife, when they were dating and even when they got married, that were just very, like, extremely just racist. For him to completely change his mind after seeing the treatment firsthand and hearing of stories is, you know, something that we look for in a president. So being located in Buffalo, we really tried to tie this in with the Buffalo community. So you could take a look here, the Montfort Marines, Private Edward Ross, he was in the Marines. Both of his children were in our documentary that we did, The Road to Integration, and he was part of the famous Montfort Marines out of North Carolina. This is an interesting piece right here, which is, this was part of basically an athletic shirt. So it would be an undershirt that the Nazis wore, and basically that was just the branding. Now, this was given to Private Indiana Hunt Martin from the 6888 as a gift from a Nazi POW. So this book was, it was actually written in the 1970s, which is a little crazy. You know, if you think that that title is bad in the 40s, this was actually written in the late 70s. Now, it's about how Eleanor Roosevelt basically stuck up for these different units, the Tuskegee Airmen, the 761st Tank Battalion. And she was labeled some not nice things by the media, but she didn't care. She really didn't. Eleanor Roosevelt was such an integral part of integration in the United States, and even FDR's presidency. You know, if you know anything about FDR and Eleanor and their relationship and just what she did during his presidency, it's astounding. In 1905, the Niagara Movement formed, which was a precursor to the NAACP. Originally, they were supposed to meet in a few different places, Buffalo, Niagara Falls. The meeting actually happened just across the river in Fort Erie, Ontario.
And that was the precursor to the NAACP, right?
That's correct. So basically, the NAACP formed from two different groups, one led by W.E. Du Bois and one led by Booker T. Washington. If you know anything about the history between them two, they weren't very friendly with each other at first, but they did resolve their differences later on in life. This is American history through and through. This has helped our nation get to where we are today, regardless of race, creed, color, sex, or anything like that. Our nation is what it is because of these strong American heroes, both white and black, and every other race that has participated in making this such a great nation. So if you like this video, subscribe. If you didn't like this video, subscribe anyway, because I am rarely in front of the camera, although maybe I might be now, because we're going to be doing a lot more videos for you guys soon. So